The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is a dear friend of mine. His name is Jim Chapman, and I had the pleasure of working with Jim when the X-Zone was working and being broadcast out of 1290 CJBK in the beautiful city of London, Ontario, Canada. And I must tell you, X-Zone Nation, if you ever have the opportunity of visiting London, great people, beautiful city, you'll thoroughly enjoy yourselves there. And Jim is a multi-talented Canadian who began his working life at 18 by signing a recording contract with Columbia Records in New York. 10 years later, he crossed musical paths with some of the biggest names in the business, including, listen to this, X-Zone, Jimi Hendrix, Carlos Santana, Sly Stone, Mick Jagger, Johnny Rivers, and Gordon Lightfoot, and played in the band of rockabilly superstar Ronnie Hawkins. But touring was getting him down, and Jim left the road to build an advertising and jingle company back in hometown London, Ontario, and found the first 24-track recording studio west of Toronto, the legendary Springfield Sound. He later became public relations and marketing director for London AA affiliate of the baseball's Detroit Tigers, and went on to develop a media career as a top-rated radio and television commentator and newspaper and magazine columnist, interviewing leading political and social figures in the United States and Canada. Now, in 1999, he had a massive heart attack that left him dead on a gurney in the local ER. While doctors tried to revive him, he had a near-death experience that opened his eyes to a whole new way of looking at the world. The result was Come Back to Life, a book recounting his journey through his life to the next and back again, and urging people not to fear death, but accept it as part of living. Joining me now from London, Ontario, Jim Chapman. And Jim, welcome back to the X-Zone. Great talking to you again, old friend.
Well, thank you, Rob. I listened to that intro. I hardly recognized that fellow. It sounds to me like he couldn't keep a job.
It sounds to me like he's a very talented person who progressed up the ladder because he was seeking something that is lacking these days, and that is the credibility, Jim, that you have always brought to whatever you've done.
Oh, you're very kind, Rob. I appreciate you saying that.
Jim, tell us a little bit about Come Back to Life.
Well, Come Back to Life is I think, and I'm going to use the word very advised, I think it's a very interesting book on a number of levels. Mm-hmm. On one level, it is kind of semi-autobiographical. It is the story of my life, but not from the point of view of, well, here's a famous guy or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just a person. It's a story of a person's life. But I use the story because a lot of things that have happened in my life, I think, have parallels in many other people's lives. I'm talking particularly about the way that we deal in our society with the idea of death. I almost died when I was a young kid. I almost choked on a candy, and if my dad hadn't heard me gasping in the kitchen and come running in and did the version of the Heimlich maneuver, I wouldn't. I I'd have been gone then. And that scared the daylights out of me because I was 7 or 8 years old, and prior to that, you don't think much about living and dying. I mean, life is life is life. That's all you know, and everything's going to go on like that forever and ever. And that just opened my eyes to the fact that no, there are no guarantees here. It can end with something as innocent as swallowing a candy the wrong way. And I spent a better part of the 4 decades living in fear, and I don't mean constant, always on my mind fear, but recurrent fear of, one day this is all going to end, and oh God, it's going to be terrible, and what's going to happen? And
Jim, stand by, good friend. You and I have to take a commercial break. Exonation, this hour, Jim Chapman is my special guest. We're talking about his book, Come Back to Life. His website, www.jimchapman.ca. That's www.jimchapman.ca. And Jim and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with more from the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Girl, don't lie just to save my feelings. Girl, don't cry and tell me nothing's wrong. Girl, don't try to make up for the reasons. I'd rather leave than never be.
Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Hi, this is Rob McConnell, and I invite you to join me on Turquoise Radio for the X Zone Radio Show, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. After 21 years of paranormal TV and radio, thousands of celebrity interviews, and millions of worldwide supporters, I am very excited to bring my show to Turquoise Radio, where together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal to the science of parapsychology and all topics in between. Check out the website at turquoiseradio.com for showtimes. The X Zone Radio Show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, on Turquoise Radio. And I'll see you in the X Zone.
I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me when a moment came that stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options and talking about sweet time. I asked him when it sank in that this might really be the real end. How's it hit you when you get that kind of news? Man, what'd you do? And he said, I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Blue Manchu, and I looked deeper and I spoke sweeter and I gave forgiveness I've been denying. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance live like you were dying.
And welcome back, everyone. Jim Chapman is my special guest. We're talking to Jim today about his book, Come Back to Life. His website is www.jimchapman.ca. Jim, as the song by Tim McGraw says, live like you were dying. Aren't we all dying? Didn't we actually start dying the moment we were born?
Absolutely right, and we both forget and remember that, Rob, and that's the real irony of it. On the one hand, we spend much of our lives denying that it's going to end. On the other hand, for a great many people, there's this sort of darkness in the background, the late-at-night fears that creep up. You know, what's going to happen when I die? I am going to die, and is there life after death? You know, many people find comfort in religion for that, and those that do, I say, God bless you, I'm glad you do, but there are a lot of people who don't get any comfort from that because they believe that when it's over, the lights go out, and that's what I believed until my life ended. As you noted, in an ER on a gurney, I had a massive heart attack. They rushed me to the hospital, and I expired on the gurney. And they thought I was gone. They kept doing the paddle thing, and actually at one point we're about to give up. The doctor told me later, said, we're going to try this one more time, and if that doesn't hit, we'll code them and it's all over. And they gave me one more shot and brought me back to life. And while they were doing that, though, I was somewhere else. I wasn't in that hospital room. I had gone to some other reality, and I don't pretend to know what it is. I don't tell people that, you know, I went to heaven or I don't know where I went, Rob, but wherever it was absolutely magical. It was the most wonderful feeling I've ever experienced. And as I stood there, and I was actually in a place, I was standing on the edge of this valley, and all these thoughts were running through my head, and I could see the sunshine, I could feel the wind on my face, and I knew very clearly, there's no question in my mind, I knew that I was dead. Because I said to myself, I've died. They lost me. I remember the, you know, some of the phrases that popped into my head. And this experience of being in this other place and then starting to get some kind of communication from someone or something that opened my eyes about the way I had been wasting my life, that wasting my time on fear of, you know, what happens when. And it was given to me, and I took it as a sacred trust, and that's how the book eventually became a book. I took it as a kind of a sacred trust to share this information that I had been given, because I was blessed to be in a position to have been in the media and have some notoriety, some small amount of fame, at least in Ontario, and it was in a position where if I spoke, people would listen. Now, that didn't mean they were going to believe necessarily what I told them, and I didn't make it a crusade. I didn't say, oh, you have to believe me. But I saw it as an opportunity to take what I had learned, that we really, really must not fear dying, although, as the song says, you've got to live, you know, you've got to acknowledge, you've got to live as though we're dying. You've got to enjoy, you've got to seize every single day, but we don't do that in fear of those days being over. We do it because we are so joyful at the opportunity to have these days, and safe in the knowledge, I believe anyway, safe in the knowledge that there are different days, other days ahead when these days are over.
Tell me, Jim, how has this near-death experience changed your life? How differently does Jim Chapman, the host of a very popular talk show out of 1290 CJBK in London, Ontario, when I was there, going back to the late 90s, I believe it was. How has that changed your day-to-day life, Jim?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Rob, is it has focused me on, you just used the phrase day-to-day. It has reminded me, and I am reminded every day, that each day is unique, and each day should be lived to the full. So I don't find myself waiting, oh gosh, I can't wait for the weekend. Oh, I can't wait for that holiday coming up, you know. I can't wait for the kids to go back to school. I don't live a can't wait life anymore. And that's one of the things that I think so many of us do. You know, if I can only get through today, I get past this week, and it's going to be better. You know, I'm going to go visit mom on the weekend, and it'll be fun. But in the meantime, the week's off. We cannot allow ourselves to fall into that trap, because it is a trap, and it robs us. It robs us of so much of life. And when you add to that the burden that many people carry, the fear of life ending, it paralyzes a lot of people. It stops them from enjoying what we have today, because they can't stop worrying about tomorrow. Now we have to plan for tomorrow. You always have to plan for tomorrow. You know, you can't just, I don't believe anyway, you don't just cast your fate to the wind.
No.
You have to plan, you have to be prudent, but that's where it has to stop. When you get to the point where planning and prudence becomes worry, it becomes self-defeating, and we have to stop that. And the book talks about that. It talks about these lessons that I learned when I was on the other side. And what I brought back, and the biggest thing, to answer your question as directly as I can, the biggest thing is that I learned the value of living each and every day to the fullest, smiling every opportunity that you have, you know, laugh every chance you have, and be as kind as you can to the people around you, because that helps make their lives better too.
Jim, when you talk about the other side, where is the other side? Is it heaven?
Oh, I wish I could answer you, Rob. Honest to gosh, I wish I knew the answer to that.
How long?
All I can, and I don't pretend to. I know some people have had near-death experiences that have made whole careers out of you know. Well, I talked to God, I did this, I did that. That was not my experience. My experience was, it was very definitely another existence, another level of existence. It was peaceful. I was filled with the most wonderful feeling of contentment and joy and love. And there was something else there, Rob, and I don't know whether it was an individual or whether it was a group of individuals, but there was another presence that surrounded me and let me know that that was exactly where I was supposed to be at that time, that I was totally and completely welcomed and loved and should just relax and become part of this greater sense. And I definitely had a sense of being part of something far larger than myself in a way that I had never even imagined existed before. And not only does it exist, but it is there. And I do believe that it's waiting for us on the other side. I think that's what it's all about. Now, if you want to call it heaven, call it heaven. If you want to call it something else, you won't get an argument from me, because I didn't put a name to it. I can't put a name to it, but I have every confidence that that is what's there, and that is what's waiting for us.
Jim, how long were you on the other side?
I was out for between 3 and 4 minutes.
Wow.
So long enough they hadn't declared me dead, because they tried that one last paddle, but I was clinically, technically dead on that table. And 3.5, 4 minutes, that's, you're way out at the edge of when, you know, whether you can come back or not. So I was pushing the envelope.
Jim, what did it feel like to come back to this side?
Well, here's the amazing thing about it. In my experience, I saw a face in front of me, and I took it to be an angel. It was a young woman's face, and I took it to be an angel, and I had been wondering what was going to happen, because it seemed to me I'd been there for longer than 3 or 4 minutes. It seemed to me I was there for 10 or 15 minutes. And this face appeared in front of me, and I thought, oh, well, here's somebody's finally come to tell me what I'm supposed to do and where I go next. And the young woman the angel yelled at me, and woke me up in effect. She yelled, said, "Mr. Chapman, are you in there? Can you hear me?" And I blinked, because I was so shocked at her yelling at me. And there was a young nurse leaning over me, same face, the young nurse leaning over me, and they had finally got me back. And of course, they want to find out whether you're still in there. Has there been brain damage? What's happened?
Yeah.
And I awoke at her yelling me, and I talked to the doctor within 10 or 15 seconds of that. Long afterwards, I interviewed him for the book, and he said it was the most amazing thing, or one of the most amazing things he'd ever seen, that when I came back, I was completely lucid, and he and I had a normal conversation. He said, usually that does not happen when we resuscitate people. They're usually disoriented, and, you know, they're spinning, and they don't know where they are, they don't know what's going on. He said, you are 100% lucid. He said, I was amazed. I couldn't believe that we could just have a conversation, you know, how are you, how do you feel, what have you been, what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the transition from here to the other place was almost instantaneous. I just closed my eyes and I was in this other place, and I closed my eyes and I was back again, and obviously not groggy, not woozy. It wasn't, the chemicals in my brain hadn't gone all sideways, which is one of the explanations some people give for near-death experiences. Say, oh no, it's just the brain dying and the chemicals do this and that and the other thing. My argument has always been, well, if that's the case, how did I maintain that consciousness from being alive to being in this other place to being back in this place again and didn't miss a beat? Just one continuous stream of consciousness. And when I got back, I was lucid and communicating with the doctor and clear as a bell. So to me, that is, for me, that's all the proof I need that near-death experiences, at least my near-death experience, was not about the brain dying. It wasn't about chemicals breaking down. It was a truly otherworldly experience.
Jim, you and I have to take a commercial break very shortly, but has your experience made the change in other people's lives who have read your book?
I think, Rob, I've been incredibly blessed to have been moved. As I said, I felt there was sort of a charge to write this book. And I did write it about 5 years ago now. And we have sold a lot of copies of this thing all around the world. And the response from people is the most gratifying thing in my life. Is the people I hear from. I get phone calls, I get emails, I still get letters from people saying, and it's not. I don't want to make this bigger than it is. They don't say, "My goodness, you've changed the universe," but people saying, "You've helped me see a better way to live. You've helped me make my life more rewarding." And the big thing for me is, you've taken away my fear of dying. And to me, if that's the only thing I ever accomplish in my life, I'll die a happy man. I think that, I'm so pleased that I was given this wonderful blessing to have experienced this.
Jim, you and I have to take a commercial break with the news.
Okay,
please stand by.
good.
Jim Chapman, a great guy, good friend. www.jimchapman.ca. And I, for one, am glad he's back on this side. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away. We'll be back after the news.
Man, what'd you do?
Have you exhausted all traditional means of healing without success? Are you experiencing communications through ghosts, angels, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services to humanity at this time through consultations. These consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you desire clarity of what may appear to be unexplainable phenomenon, then contact me through my website at aguidinglight, spelled LITE.com, to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Splenda, and you're listening to my dad, Rob McConnell, on the X Zone.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell.
Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro For You, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. Jim Chapman is our guest to this hour. We're talking about Jim's book, Come Back to Life. It's all about a near-death experience that Jim had. And, Jim, when it comes to society and some religious philosophies, why do you think that the fear of death is instilled in us?
I think there's a certain natural tendency, Rob. Once we realize that things do die, right? Mm-hmm. Little children, we hope, are innocent of that and are not going to face that reality until they get a little older. But sooner or later, we all reach the point where a pet dies or a family relative or a friend, somebody dies, and we become aware of the fact that they're gone. And I think there's a certain natural inclination on our part to fear that because we don't want to be gone. We can't imagine what that would be like. Some religions, I think all religions, want to provide people with some sense of comfort beyond that. And depending on what your religion is and what it teaches about life beyond this one, there is comfort for millions or billions of people around the world do find some comfort in their religious beliefs. But it's my experience, my personal experience, because I've lectured a lot about this since I had my near-death experience. I've traveled from Seattle to New York to Dallas and all over the place giving lectures and speaking about this, that the most common thing that people talk to me about afterwards, because I always enjoy the and I know you do speaking as well, and you know what I'm talking about. Afterwards, you get to chat with some of the folks about what you've been speaking about. It's a wonderful thing to do. So many of them have told me that, well, I believe that there's something beyond this life intellectually, but when it gets right down to the heart, I'm still frightened. I'm afraid. And to me, that may be the I don't want to say it's a failing of religion because it's not a failing, but to me, it's kind of sad that more people are not able to make the connection, the intellectual and the spiritual and the emotional connection, so to fully be fulfilled by their religion and its promise of whatever the afterlife may be. But I know from experience that there are all kinds of people, religious and non-religious, they just can't do that. They can't make that connection. There is still that fear deep in the pit of their stomach. Because, what if I'm going to end up in a lake of fire, or what if I'm not, or what if I'm going to end up nowhere, I think is the big frightening thing for people. What happens if the light goes out? I mean, that's got to be terrible and horrible and awful, and how will I ever survive? It's beyond comprehension. It's so frightening they don't even think about it. Well, my reality is, and I've had the opportunity to talk to many, many other people who've had NDEs, and it's interesting sideline here, Rob, that as our expertise particularly in the area of cardiac health has improved, doctors are now saving literally hundreds of thousands of people a year who were dying 20, 30 years ago from heart attacks. Had I had the kind of heart attack I had in 1989 and not 1999, I would not have survived it. So we have this huge new group of people who are effectively dying and then being brought back to life, and a significant percentage of them are reporting near-death experiences. So that just reinforces my own belief that this experience is very real. I don't know why everybody who dies doesn't have it. I don't know the answer to that. But I choose to be an optimist because I am an optimist, and my experience taught me to be an optimist. I choose to believe that what I experienced and what a great many other people are experiencing is a precursor of what's on the other side. So what does it mean? People say, well, so what? What do you think that means? Well, to me, what it means is we have to stop being afraid of death because it's there, it's inevitable. We all know it's inevitable, but I believe that it's not the end of anything. It's just a transition to something else. So people have said, well, does that mean you'd jump in front of a moving train or you'd step in front of a bullet? No, I'm still afraid to die because it might be painful. It could be messy. It's going to be distressing to my family and so on. But Woody Allen had a great line about that. And he said, I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens. So to me, that kind of sums it all up, right? Like physically, as a physical, corporeal being, I'm not looking forward to this life ending, but I'm not afraid of what's beyond. I'm not at all afraid of what's beyond. And that is so incredibly liberating to you, you can hardly imagine the difference in your life when you get up or you wake up in the morning. You're somebody like me who for the previous 40 years, almost every day at some point of the day, there'd be some little niggling reminder that, I'm going to die one day, or, oh, gee, I hope this, or I hope that, oh, this doesn't. We all live with that. Some of us worse than others, and it was a pretty serious problem for me for many years. And it led to depression and a lot of other unpleasant things. And to wake up in the morning, open your eyes and go, wow, this is fantastic. I got another day ahead of me. This is great. And not think, oh, but what if it's the last one? I don't think that way. I do not think that way. I live as though every day is my last day. I get as much pleasure and enjoyment and do as much for other people as I can because I find that gives me pleasure. I do as much of that every day as I can, but I don't worry about, well, gee, what if I don't wake up tomorrow? If I don't wake up tomorrow, no problem. We'll press on, and we'll deal with that when it comes.
Jim, do you find the medical community is finally starting to take note of near-death experiences and are actually taking them seriously, or are they still looking at it as a part of the dying process?
I think it depends on who you talk to, Rob. I have interviewed doctors who believe very strongly that it is simply a chemical reaction, that it's just part of the dying process, that the brain breaks down, and they can give you chapter and verse on what chemical turns into what chemical and does this and does that. But I've also talked to a number of doctors, particularly ER doctors, and I think of the doctor who was my ER doctor, who some of them are very willing to say, listen, this is an experience beyond anything normal. It is beyond anything that our senses tell us should happen, but it happens so often that, we believe something's going on. But the group that I've had the most response from are ER nurses and cardiac care nurses, or nurses that work with the dying, with the palliative care and geriatric nurses. Talk to them about their experience of being with people when they pass, and there's a magic to that experience. Now, sometimes it's tempered by the passing can be very painful and horrible to watch and so on. Some forms of cancer and so on are very unpleasant death. But you talk to the people that work in that area, and I will say, in my own experience, I'm not going to quote you any numbers, but in my own experience, that a large majority of those people, when I talk to them or I give a lecture about my experience, they're smiling, they're nodding their heads, and they come up and talk to me afterwards and say, I completely understand what you're saying. Even people who've not had it themselves, but have been there and watched other people either go through NDEs or just come to the end of their lives, and there's something very magical that happens in those last few hours. And I had the wonderful blessing, although it was a loss to us, to our family, my mother-in-law, with whom I was very close. I was there when she passed, and I was with her for 3 days before she passed. And I know that her experience, and talking to me just hours before she actually died, that she was going from here to somewhere else and coming back and going and talking to her through that experience just simply solidified, if it needed to be, and it really didn't, but if I needed any more proof that there is something else there, that gave it to me. And people who work in that environment, in my experience, they understand that. They are not the skeptics. I think the skeptics are the ones who look at it from a purely scientific view, and I don't blame them for that. That's their, we need scientists. We need people who are studying the human body and, the human brain and all of this. We need people. We need them to do it objectively. We need them to do it with the scientific method, and I appreciate and applaud people who do that, but at the same time, I have to say that science does not yet know everything, cannot yet explain everything, and I'm not sure that science itself will ever be able to explain everything. I think there are things that maybe transcend that as far as human beings and our ability to comprehend. And to me, I would never argue with a doctor who said, your experience wasn't real. I would simply ask him, prove it.
Jim, we call it the other side, or you call it the other side, and that so many people believe that this little slice in the time-space continuum that we call our present-day reality is just part of an ongoing process. I've spoken to people who have had near-death experiences, And one of the ways that somebody described it that I'll never forget is they say, just imagine, Rob, a wall full of books. Each book has a chapter. And when you go from the first book, the first chapter, that is when your life starts. And as you progress through each chapter, through each book, is another existence. You look at that and you say, wow. And it's because of people who have the near-death experience, who share the experience, who are willing to share the experience, that I believe that more and more people are coming to better understand that the passing or dying in this existence does not mean the end of it all.
No, I hope that number of people increases and increases and increases. And one of the interesting things, very quick note I want to make here. Until very recently, most people were very reluctant to talk about this because they were called crazy, you're insane, you're nuts. And it's only been in the last 20 or 30 years, really, where you've seen a large number of people stepping forward, partly because more people are being brought back, as I said earlier. But partly, I think, too, and because of people like myself, and I'm not taking any credit, but I know there are more people like me in communities who maybe had some visibility, who, when they went through the experience, said, I am not going to be quiet.
Yeah.
I am not crazy. I know what happened to me, and I'm going to tell people because they need to know. And the more people that do that, then the more other people come forward and say, you know, it happened. I had a minister, I did a speech in his church one day, and he came up to me afterwards. He said, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I had a near-death experience 30 years ago. I have never told anyone because I was afraid that they would think less of me as a minister, that it would hurt my ministry, and they'd think I was crazy. And he said, you've given me the courage. Next week I'm going to tell my congregation that I had the same experience you did, and let the chips fall where they may. And he did that. He called me later on and said it's the best thing I'd ever done.
Jim,
that kind of liberation is just, it's so magical.
Jim, you say that the West is a culture in denial. What do you mean by that?
Well, we deny death, right? People don't die. They pass on. They're deceased, you know, or they've gone over. I say they're dead. Well, dead is dead. You know, let's not play games with words. Dead is dead. But dead is not bad. You know, it used to be people died in the home. You know, you died at home with your family around you, and now you go someplace to die. It's like we just, and when the body is dead, nobody, even the family, would touch the body. You know, it used to be that you prepared the body yourself for burial, and so you get a chance to, I think, to see that whole process as part of the continuum. And now we've taken it all away. It all goes to the funeral. Everybody goes to the funeral home. You know, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to admit it. Although it's like the sword of Damocles hanging over everybody's head, and nobody wants to look up and acknowledge that the sword's there. Heck, you got to look at the sword. You got to smack it around once in a while. You got to recognize that, yeah, it's there and it's waiting for you. But so what? It does not have power over our lives. We have power over our lives.
If we do have the power, Jim, and I believe you're right, why are so many people still in denial?
Because they have not found a way that works for them to acknowledge the reality that we're going to die, but to accept also that we have more and more evidence every day that the end of this physical existence is not the end of life. It's not the end of existence. It's not the end of consciousness. But so many people are still trapped in the superstitions of their childhood, their superstition of their adulthood. They are trapped in this idea in our society that we all want to be young forever. The baby boomers now, right? We don't want to get old. We want to be young. We want to live forever. There's an awful lot of societal pressures on us to say, yeah, when the end comes, it's going to be terrible, and that's the end of everything, so pretend it'll never happen and press on. I don't believe that you can live your life to the fullest if you're always afraid of dying. You know, the great tragedy in life is not dying. It's being afraid of living. That's the great tragedy, and that's what we have to overcome. And that's what I talk about in the book, and Come Back to Life. I explain what happened to me, how I got to the point where I was, you know, desperately frightened of dying, and out of nowhere came this experience that I didn't expect. I had no religious background for it, nothing. Out of nowhere came this incredible, eye-opening experience, and out of that experience came this book to share what I learned and how it made such a difference in my life, because I was as frightened as anybody of dying. And today I can tell you, when it happens, and we're going to press on. And that changed for me as the most magical thing that ever happened in my life. It's the most magical thing I think can happen in anybody's life.
Jim, stand by. We've got to take our final break. Great talking to you again, old friend. Exo Nation, Jim Chapman is our special guest. I had the pleasure of working with Jim at 1290 CJBK in London, Ontario, where he did a morning talk show, a very popular morning talk show. His website is www.jimchapman.ca. We'll be back talking more about coming back to life on the other side of this break. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
I guess I thought you'd be here forever. Another illusion I chose to create. You don't know what you got until it's gone. And I found out a little too late. I was acting as if you were lucky to have me. Doing you a favor, I hardly knew you. But then you were gone, and then all was wrong. Had no idea how much I care. Now being with you takes a lot of getting.
Exo Nation, my guest this hour has been Jim Chapman, and as I've been saying throughout the hour, I had the opportunity and pleasure of working with Jim at 1290 CJBK in London, Ontario, where Jim had a very popular morning talk show. He's got a book out. He's got more than one book, but the book we've been talking about today has been Come Back to Life. It's all about his near-death experience. And Jim, where can listeners get a copy of your book?
Well, if they're into ebooks, it's available at Barnes & Noble in the States. It's available at Chapters Indigo in Canada. And if they'd like a physical copy of the book, that's available through my website at Jim Chapman, www.jimchapman.ca.
Jim, what would you like to leave the Exo Nation with tonight?
Rob, I think I'm going to repeat something I said earlier
Sure.
because I think it bears repeating, and it is this. The greatest tragedy in life is not dying. It's not living because we're afraid of death. Life offers so many wonderful things and wonderful opportunities. It's an incredible gift. And if we allow death with a capital D to steal any of that from us, to rob that enjoyment and that pleasure, then I think we have not lived to the fullest. Death is nothing to fear. It happens to everyone, and there is something waiting beyond it. I absolutely believe that. I was there, I saw it, and I look forward to going back again.
Any chance of Jim Chapman coming back to the radio waves?
You never know. You just never know, Rob. It's been a great pleasure to share the waves with you today, so who knows?
Jim, we've gone through so many things on our own paths. Being a broadcaster, have you seen a lot of changes over the years since you left broadcasting from?
Yes, I'm disappointed by many of them. I came up in broadcasting at a time when it was still very much about communities. It was still very respondent to the individual communities. The bean counters were taking over, but they weren't quite there yet. But today, I think we've lost a lot of that connection between radio, particularly television too, but radio stations and their communities. There are still some good ones out there, some great stations out there and great people, but it's not like it used to be.
Jim Chapman, thank you very much for joining us, Jim. Always a great pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X Zone. Until then, my friend, stay well.
Thanks, Rob. You too.
Bye-bye. X Zone Nation, Jim Chapman. He's the author of Come Back to Life, a story about his very own near-death experience. And Jim goes out and he lectures, and his message is, you have nothing to fear. Everybody's going to die, and as I've said many of times myself, you start dying the moment you're born. The moment you're conceived is the moment you start dying. All this and more when we come back here to the X Zone. Once again, Jim Chapman's book is entitled Come Back to Life, and his website is www.jimchapman.ca. And I look forward to the next time Jim joins us. He's a great guy. And I'd like to hear your comments on dying, death. Are you afraid? X-Zone at XZoneRadioTV.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X-Zone continues from our studios here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. You can always listen to the X-Zone 724-365 at www.xzbn.net/live HTM. I'll be back after the news at 6.5 minutes past. Don't go away.